Pinky and the Brain, Issue 12. It starts out with Brain reading a book somehow small enough for him. In the 1960s, he time traveled to with Pinky, who has a small magazine. Brain must have used his technology to print out tiny versions of the books. He says that people flock to pay homage to a cloth old wall or even a tortilla with pictures of holy men drawn on them by someone. Pinky wastes his time saying something irrelevant to him and apologizes and is told that people would worship him if his image appeared on the moon. In the short term, but pretty soon people would find out he's great at technology and assume that he caused it with that and get mad at him. The people who don't know about Brain would tell people about Brain. So pretty soon everyone would know they did it with technology. For some reason, Brain thinks he needs to do it at a specific time. He wonders where to get a lens with the right reflective properties. Why get one? Can't he make anything? He just doesn't have the materials to make it, apparently. Pinky says they could go to a surfing competition he saw in his magazine, because the grand prize is a glass surfboard made from California sand, which would have the perfect saturation of suntan oils to make a great lens. Brain wants to enter the competition and win, as if he'd ever have a chance when he's so small and got no experience with surfing. He'd know he has a much better chance of just stealing the prize from the winner, with his technology, like in their sleep. Instead of waste time getting him and Pinky in disguises that people would see through immediately and only pretend to be fooled by them. Why does he even bother with the disguise? People let him do anything without one. Pinky says you can't compete until you prove you live the ultimate surfer's cool lifestyle full of ladies and dances. That makes no sense. Wouldn't they let anyone compete? Brain says he'll try anyways because he's arrogant, even though he has no luck with the ladies. Brain ends up laughed at by the surfers, probably because of the fact that he said, and paused before saying slang, and the fact that he has a mature adult's voice. I like that Brain doesn't get mad at them and isn't sure what to say, trailing off. It's nice of Pinky to stand up for him. Brain thanks him, and when he approaches some women, they naturally notice his height, although they don't have to make fun of him to his face for it. Out of nowhere, he says the two girls think they're better than one another, and says that as soon as one of them isn't looking, the other will swoop down on him. He has no reason to actually believe this. It'd make more sense if this was an intentional ploy to make them start arguing over the fact that one did that to the other earlier. One of the women says she's not getting Brain and he's hers, even though he's clearly a little mouse. And even if they didn't think he was the mouse, he's still too short for them. So they unrealistically start fighting and magically summon dust clouds. People say wow about it and Brain's hurt. When Pinky says Brain's the most and then says Narf, I assume the surfers beside him are talking the way they are because they assume Narf is some new slang. Because one of them goes on to use it to mean cool. And then the same gag is repeated twice with Pinky's other verbal tics, even though it's obvious that they're just verbal tics, because he wasn't using them as adjectives. Pinky thanks them, and one of them says it's awesome hanging out with them, for no reason. This story makes no sense. Somehow Pinky's doing great at surfing on the first try, and he gets worried at being told that some biker bullies are gonna come for Brain. Biker bullies on the beach. That seems like just an exaggeration for a parody. With Brain already healed up, he tells a woman it was nice of her to feed him, and then makes it clear that he hates it. Some sand gets kicked at them by a jerk, and you can't blame Brain for not planning to be violent with them because he's just a little mouse with no pockets to hold any ray guns in. She calls him little man just as an insult, and arbitrarily hugs the guy who just kicked sand in her face and walks off with him. Brain says it's brains over brawn any day, but then tells the bad guy that peanut butter and a tower in France have a lot in common, and throws peanut butter at the bully, making a pun. It's not really brains if he's provoking him, even if it's for his plan. Brain runs up a slanted surface, and because the bully's blind, when he could have easily wiped his face off first to be able to see, he runs off the edge of what he's running on and falls into a trash bin. This makes him popular at the beach, and he ends up on the covers of magazines, clearly forcing himself to smile on them. Someone holding a TV show says that Brain came out of obscurity, which would only make sense if he actually just appeared in the 60s because he time traveled there. Brain gets to sing in front of a mic on TV. Some girls steal their clothes, and they get welcomed into the surf competition. It'd be better for them if Pinky could do the surfing. Brain says that with a remote-controlled surfboard, all he has to do is let Pinky do the steering. It'd be better if he did the steering by doing what he did when surfing, because that'd actually take advantage of his surfing skills. But Brain wouldn't to know about them unless he was told. Instead, when Brain tells him to watch out for that boy, Pinky thinks he means a kid and doesn't steer Brain away from the boy, so he crashes into it. Brain still gets the surfboard, so that was just pointless slapstick again, and instead he wins because the others wiped out. Brain's on crutches and says that Pinky will have to do the etching since he hurt him. But he always heals from his injuries really fast, even if he got flattened. But somehow this time he won't. This must be set chronologically before he had completely perfected the healing technology. So bruises heal fast, but these kinds of injuries take a little longer. Pinky holds the board a certain way as Brain is already not using the crutches and standing just fine. Pinky carves the head of a celebrity into the moon instead of Brain for no reason. This would only make sense if he was intentionally trying to ruin his plan. It's not like I'm forgetting which face to carve is the explanation. If he remembered to carve a face into it, he'd know it had to be Brain's. He knows that Brain tries to take over the world every night with him and only cares about him and Pinky, so he'd never think Brain would want any face on the moon other than his. So the story ends with Pinky injured in a cage with him, but he's singing happily without a care in the world, because he's just that optimistic and forgiving. This has got to be the most forced way that Pinky screwed up the plan ever. In the next story, Pinky asks to be called Ishmael, and then talks too much and annoys Brain into saying to get on with it. He apologizes, and then says this is the story of Moby Dick. What's going on? Why would Brain want Pinky to tell the story? I'm glad I don't know the exact plot of Moby Dick, because I'd be bored with the story ripping off its plot points, as anyone could do. We see Pinky and the Brain dressed like mermaids. Brain says he needs a lot of whale plaque to make a formula that, when mixed with the world's water reservoirs, will make everyone so allergic to salt that they'll be too busy sneezing to keep him from taking over the world. Pinky referenced sneezing powder earlier. He can make anything, so why would he have to settle for this? Pinky jokingly pretends that the seashell he's listening to is telling him that Brain's plan won't work because he couldn't get close enough to a whale's teeth. Brain says that he doesn't have the time or resources to build a whale robot to infiltrate the herd. Why does he think he doesn't have the time? He can make himself immortal. A sailor walks into the aquarium room, and I wonder why he's talking to himself with so much boring dialogue. He wants another bizarre creature for its exhibit. Pinky and Brain would be seen as bizarre without wearing mermaid costumes or being genetically altered to be mermaids. The sailor says his business is doing poorly and he wants to catch a whale to get people to see it. Brain plans on catching and studying that whale somehow, and then building a robot copy to fool the other whales into letting him scrape the tartar he needs from their teeth. Brain wants to put a model ship together, and tells Pinky to move his end to the left, and gets apologized to because it won't budge. Then the ship sets sail with them on it. Pinky serves Brain dinner and he hates it and gets apologized to. Brain just tells him to climb up the mast and be on the lookout for whales so that it could call out a signal. He calls it out a lot because he already sees them, and he doesn't believe him until the ship gets sent upwards by the water from the jumping whales. Pinky gets told that the whale they're looking for is tiny. Why would they try to look for a very specific whale instead of settling for any one of them? Pinky points out Moby Dick to him, and Brain asks him for help with the harpoon cannon. Pinky shows him standards hoping he won't shoot him, and Brain says he's not a barbarian, and merely wants to study him after hitting him with a plunger. He tells Pinky to step back and give him breathing room, but he's still next to him as he fires the cannon, and they get flying away with the rope attached to the plunger that hits the whale. Out of nowhere, it turns out the whale is a mecha piloted by Snowball, who did have the time and resources to make this. And for no reason it looks like an obvious machine on the outside. when he'd know better, and it didn't look like that before. How's it supposed to fool the whales then? Snowball correctly assumes that he has the same plan as him, as it can't take it seriously that he's here because of how unlikely it is that they cross paths by accident. If he's in the business of foiling his plans, as an earlier issue established, there'd be no reason for him to not ruin his plans far more often, but instead he barely ever shows up to bother us. So he feels like he could have easily not been there every time. Not to mention how unlikely it is that they had the same exact plan at the same exact time. Snowball cuts a rope to make them slam into the side of the ship. They get back on the ship, and Snowball controls his mecha to tow the ship so that it goes in and out of the water and gets destroyed. Pinky shows some common sense by cheerfully wanting to give up and go home, even if reasoning with Brain is clearly pointless here. Snowball looks through a periscope and sees a whale that's smiling really widely as if it's a person, somehow. And he notices he's no closer to it than before, as if it's a picture, or he can't move the mecha. He wonders where the fog is coming from, and decides to go up top and investigate. The fog smells like mouthwash, like Pinky's bad cooking. He falls backwards, and we see Brain on top of the mecha holding its periscope, while Pinky's holding something gray near a stove with something sending fog out of it. Snowball talks as if he's been temporarily defeated, and I wonder how they took control of his mecha so effortlessly without him noticing they were modifying it until it was too late, when it's in the water where they can't breathe or swim very fast. Brain pours Pinky's cooking from earlier into the ocean when it could have easily not done that, saying that's unfit to eat. And later on he finds out that there's no plaque in the pan because the whales gargled the mouthwash he sent into the ocean. I know he hated his cooking enough to want to spite it, but it's still frustrating for his plan to fail in a way that could have very easily not happened. Brain decides to pilot the whale mecha away, and the story ends there. And it'll probably be a new plot next time, even though there's no reason that they wouldn't go on to see their plan to completion. Because so what if these whales got their plaque cured? They could go to swim the mecha towards some new whales and get it from them. It's not like whales are an extremely endangered species. So why would Brain give up this plan? This would have to be another universe. And this is the last we're seeing of it. The first story by Jesse Leon McCann is about Brain trying to win a glass surfboard to carve his face into the moon with the sun's rays from the ground, which I doubt is possible with no modification to it, because that seems pretty overpowered. And he thinks he needs to win a surfing competition and get it, when waiting for someone to win it, following him home and stealing it would be a lot easier. Especially since some of the story had padding where he somehow needed to become a hit with the ladies to be allowed to even enter. And he succeeded in getting women to fight over him for no reason. I like that he humiliated a beach bully. That might have been the only good part of the story. Otherwise he made no sense. Especially because there was no reason given for why Pinky would carve the wrong face on the moon, when we're supposed to totally buy that he's 100% loyal to Brain. I know Brain's impatient, but why did he trust Pinky with the delicate task of doing that, instead of waiting to fully heal and doing it himself? While he didn't know he'd make the wrong face, he could think that he wouldn't carve the face to look enough like him because he's not smart enough, because he might not be a good enough artist. While Brain losing the surfing competition would be very predictable, at least it would have made sense for a way for him to fail. Instead, the writer wrote himself into a corner. Pinky sneezing when trying to carve the moon would make more sense as a reason for him to screw up. The second story, by Jesse McCann again, is about Brain pursuing a whale to get plaque from it for a plan using a model ship with a plan to make a robot whale, who could approach the whales in safety. There is no reason for there to be Moby Dick references, because he doesn't go insane trying to catch the specific whale, so it's not too much of a ripoff. When it made me think it would be because of the references, making it have a bad first impression. There's no reason for him to care which whale he catches, until it turns out to be a mecha of Snowball's. And I wish I saw how they took control of it, because that was way too easy. It was entertaining to see the model ship get towed under the ocean, and to see Pinky's cooked mouthwash lure Snowball to the top of the mecha in a Chekhov's gun. But it made no sense that the plan failed, and that seems to be a pattern. Brain could have very easily not dumped Pinky's mouthwash in the ocean, and had the plaque vanish, a punishment for littering the ocean. But there's no reason he wanted to go find some more whales in a short amount of time and succeed at his plan. So why did he talk as if his plan failed? It was only a very temporary setback. This is like part 1 of a 2-parter story and it gets ditched. If he doesn't have the time and resources to make a robot whale, how would he have enough of those to make enough of his formula to make everyone allergic to salt? He needs to have as much formula as there is water in every reservoir. And for someone impatient to take over the world in just one day every plan, he would probably get bored and give up on constantly getting whale plaque because it would take longer than a month. He could always make robots with the sole purpose of manning the robot whale and collecting the tartar for him, while he goes on to try other plans. So he probably would have just done that. And that's why the next issue will abandon this plot thread. He didn't give up on this plan, it's just taking too long because there's so much water on the planet. And probably not nearly enough whale tartar by comparison. So maybe his plan is doomed. Unless he can artificially make whale plaque. If he could mass produce it chemically, then it could get his plan to work.